Hi, welcome to another episode of MYD Global. I'm your host, Leanne Hackman-Carty. Today I'm talking to Brent Davis, Director of Canadian Ministry Projects for Samaritan's Purse. Did you ever wonder what happens when a big semi pulls up, full of tools and equipment, able to equip maybe even 100, 200 volunteers on site to do some work in rebuilding a community? Well, that's exactly what Samaritan's Purse does. And I'm talking to Brent today about that, so stay tuned as he explains that particular program as well as a lot of other things they're doing to make a difference in the communities they support. Hey Brent, nice to see you again. How are you doing today?
Hey, doing awesome. Thanks for having me, Leanne.
Great. Well, I'm glad you could join us. And one of the things, maybe just before we get started on the organization, tell me a little bit about yourself, like what your background is.
Sure, yeah. So I'm as you mentioned, I'm the Director of Canadian Ministry Projects here at Samaritan's Purse. I've been with Samaritan's Purse since 2007. Actually started in church world. So I came from the Ottawa area. I was involved as a pastor in a Baptist church. And really started with Samaritan's Purse in our international teams program, where we send teams all around the world. And disaster relief, at least in the Canadian context with Samaritan's Purse Canada, was very, very young in 2007. We had, I think we had a pickup truck and a tool trailer. And so I started as part of my other responsibilities. Everybody has that sort of other duties as assigned as part of their job description. That was the corner of my desk project. And the last 13 years, we've grown, and I've had the privilege of growing along with the project into what we're able to do today, right across Canada, helping with recovery.
Well, you know, I had a pleasure of coming to your facility in Calgary. And seeing some of the equipment that you guys have. Can you kind of go through the various elements of your disaster relief program?
Yeah, absolutely. And you sort of mentioned some of our equipment. I'm shooting this interview inside one of our, what we call our disaster relief units. So we have 4 of these. It's a 53-foot semi-trailer. Anybody that watches NASCAR would sort of recognize as a sort of a NASCAR style race trailer. And this is really our command center on site. So when we arrive in a community, whether it's after or in response to a hurricane, a tornado, flooding, fire event, this is really our primary tool that we bring to the table. And this office that you can see, it has all of the communications equipment inside. We staff it with coordination staff. And the back 40 feet of this trailer, it's full of tools, safety equipment, everything that we need to arm and equip volunteers to go out with us and serve. In addition to this unit, we also have sort of logistical support equipment, so skid steers, pickup trucks. We have our own generators, diesel-powered generators. And then we have shower units, so a 6-unit shower unit and bunk units. So basically, when we bring a group of volunteers on site, we're basically bringing everything that we need to be able to provide assistance to the community without drawing off of community resources. So you can basically make anywhere a hotel, for lack of a better term, once you have a shower unit and some opportunity to be able to do food prep and that, now you can support an army of volunteers.
And so did the volunteers meet you there, or you just show up on site and whoever's local you'll say put them to work?
Well, it's both and. So we've got a core group of volunteers that we call our site leadership team. And we've invested in training in them, their experience, they're proven, and we have somewhere in the order of 120 site leadership team members across the country. And so we pull from that group first, and they're the ones that are giving leadership to the response. And then sort of beyond that, all of the real horsepower is general volunteers. largely they're coming from the community, and it's a beautiful thing, sort of watching, folks that were themselves either minimally or unimpacted by that particular disaster. They want to go out and they want to help their neighbors, but they don't know whose door to knock on. They feel weird knocking on somebody's door saying, "Hey, do you need help?" And they don't necessarily know what needs to be done, especially in some of the more technical work, whether it's flood mitigation or roof tarping, or even when we go in and do fire recovery or possession recovery post-fire and sifting through ash. There's a lot of health and safety considerations that your average volunteer wouldn't know about, but with some trained leadership, we can take really anybody that wants to help. We give them on-site orientation. They meet us at this trailer, wherever it's set up on-site in the community, and we give them the required safety equipment and the supervision oversight that they need to make sure that they're working safe, but also they know they're doing a good job. And when they leave at the end of the day, the work they've done has been helpful, and they've done no harm.
That's great, because I know so many communities, if they don't have this type of equipment, this kind of process in place, I mean, you can be putting volunteers in harm's way, and that's very dangerous. The one you just mentioned, the one program, and I had heard of this before. I love that one. The one where you sift through, I guess it's after a disaster. Can you just explain that a bit? Because I think that's very impactful, given that sometimes people lose everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an incredibly impactful program, and we saw this, of course, most recently, or perhaps not most recently, but most vividly with the Fort McMurray wildfires. We deployed up there, and what we were able to do was go back into with the homeowner homes that were destroyed by fire. And we can take a search team in, and it's all hazmat, so they're in full personal protective equipment. And before they even set foot on the property, there's a conversation that takes place with the homeowner, and just talking about what could we hope to find, what would you like us to look for, where could we find it, how is your house laid out. These are critical logistical questions, but they're also critical emotional questions, as we're helping the individual process their loss and process their grief. They don't even know it's happening yet. Yeah. And they're starting to put words on what they've lost. And from there, we descend down into usually the basement, because the house typically burns down into the basement. And we'll start basically a grid search. And we have sifting screens and so forth. And it's just amazing what we're able to return back to people. In some cases, you pull it out of the ash, it doesn't look like much, but for the homeowner, the memory and the value that's attached to it is incredible. We did one job where we pulled, I think really most of all we pulled out of that home was just the face mask from a hockey mask, and returned it back to the homeowner, and she took it, and she's an amateur hockey player, and says, this is the first hockey mask or hockey helmet that I ever bought new. And so she just cherished that. And it was just something tactile that she could hang on to and move forward with. We were just up in Prattle Prairie this past spring with the Northern Alberta wildfires here in 2019 in the spring. And we were able to return a set of century-old stirrups. The leather was all gone, but the iron was still there, and so we were able to return those back to the homeowner, and he could take and kind of continue on with. It seems like something so small, but it's just unbelievably powerful to be able to give that back to somebody, and it's something that they can hang on to from their past when they walk up to the site and look like everything's gone. All of a sudden, here's something that was retained.
Well, and I know you have another program, and I don't know what it's called, but where you go in and support those that are on the front lines. It's more that mental health piece, that psychological piece. Can you speak to that piece?
Yeah, so we, Samaritan's Purse, we deploy always alongside our sister organization, the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, and they have a program called the Rapid Response Team. And these are folks, there's a network of between 200 and 300 trained chaplains that deploy across the country. They deploy alongside us, They also deploy independently of us as well to cases of, say, civil unrest. The Toronto Danforth shooting, I think we can recall that a couple of years ago. They were on site right in Greektown in Toronto. And these are folks that they have critical incident stress management training. They have psychological first aid training on top of any other training they're bringing to the table. Most of them, they're already trained in whether it's in chaplaincy, some are even sort of ex-emergency services as well. And they're just bringing that ability to help people emotionally and psychologically process what's going on. Remind them that their reaction is a normal reaction to a very abnormal circumstance that they're going through. And it's a powerful thing when we can work together, certainly in a context of a disaster and response to a disaster, that we're able to hit the physical needs, but also the emotional, the psychological, and the spiritual needs of those that we're serving. And it's just one sort of package deal that that folks are able to begin that recovery in a number of facets of the areas where they need to recover. And that's just an incredible ministry that these chaplains are able to bring to, whether it's a disaster or whether it's a man-made crisis.
Yeah, no, I know that even in the work that we've done, it's that mental health piece, that PTSD trauma piece, that's often goes unaddressed, and people bury it. And there was a woman I met recently, and she just talked about, she was in Slave Lake, and I don't think her house burned down, but very close, and she thought she was fine. Well, fast forward, 7 years later, when those fires were burning this summer, she said she could not sleep. Her kids were having nightmares, and she's moving now. So, that's the thing. People want to start and rebuild, but unless you pay attention to all of these facets, it's going to be tough.
People forget sometimes that just because you yourself weren't impacted, your community was impacted, your sense of space was impacted, and we tend to gloss over the significance of space and of our own environment. Whether it's High River post flood or whether it's Fort McMurray post fire, the community that you drove into for however many years you lived there, the day after that event, or the day the barriers came down and the evacuation order was rescinded and you went home, your community was forever changed, and you need to grieve that loss. And people generally overlook that because they say, "Oh, I was unimpacted, right? My neighbor lost their home. I don't have the right to grieve any loss. I didn't have any loss." And it's something that we need to talk more about. And so I'm glad to hear you say that and sort of see the conversation starting to go that direction in a number of communities as we talk about these things more.
Yeah, I think we have to. So, you've got a lot of experience. You've traveled all over the place. Is there anything, when you think from a hopeful perspective, or are there things you think that there's some opportunities that lie ahead in this area that you guys are going to be moving into more so, or just curious on that front?
Yeah, there's two areas that give me a lot of hope. One is in the Canadian context, we have a very unique interplay between non-government organizations and faith-based organizations in this country. And it's unique, I believe, at least in the North American context, it's unique to Canada. Our American counterparts, they have incredible resource capacity, but it's an incredibly competitive environment in the non-government organization, the helping organization world. In Canada, we've taken incredible strides towards collaboration and cooperation among non-government organizations, and I think it's just such a hallmark of who we are as a country, as a culture. But it really raises the bar in terms of what we're able to offer a community, because we're not tripping over one another. We're actually coordinating our efforts and ensuring that those that need help are getting help quickly, and there isn't that duplication of service. And so that's a huge win, and that continues to grow. There's a newly developed national consortium of NGOs, or non-government organizations, And there's 16 organizations, I believe, sitting on that consortium that are all have national scope. And I think the other area of hope that it's maybe a glimmer of hope, but we're blowing on that ember as much as we can, is the role of the faith community inside the community. And we started sort of pressing into this post Fort McMurray wildfire and in the recovery. And for us, we're a Christian organization, and so we went to churches in the community, and instead of sort of prescribing a recovery solution, we started asking them the question, what does recovery look like to you? If this is in fact the new normal for your community, what does that look like in the context of the church reaching out back into its community? Because we know that those that are connected to a faith community are inherently more disaster resilient. We wanted to encourage that, and we saw incredible unique projects coming out of that experience. Everything from after-school youth programming to help youth process what they'd gone through. To another church went to a community garden program and said, what we really need in our neighborhood is community. While we have this land, how can we bring people together? Community garden. It's been working wonderfully to build community and for neighbors to get to know their neighbors. So we're looking at how do we take what we've learned there and start sort of migrating it to other recovery and what we're calling church-based community resiliency programming. And so I'm really excited about that and the possibilities that are inherent with that sort of an approach.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, I may have to get back in touch with you once that gets a little further, and we can update everyone on where that's at, because that's very interesting. Because there's so many communities now looking at resilience in many ways, and that's an interesting component to consider as well. So, well, Brent, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today about what Samaritan's Purse is doing, not only locally but nationally and internationally. I know you've got a lot of great people that work there, a lot of very committed people, staff and volunteers, and wish you all the best in the future, and as you continue to reach out to those that are most in need.
Thanks so much, Leanne. Appreciate it.